All right, good morning once again, and welcome to this super jumbo plenary session. That's our terminology, super jumbo. It includes the 80 students of mine who are in section M, and we'll meet again on Thursday at the regular time of 11 a.m. It also includes multiple sections across the college. We're doing this partly because of COVID, obviously, and some of the budgetary problems we faced, but you know that City College has made a great effort. Both the administration, staff, and the faculty, we've all made a big effort to see that your education continues without interruptions. We're very happy to be able to bring this to you on a Zoom platform. On Mondays, for my group, Section M, the 80 of you will meet again on Blackboard on Thursdays. I know it's a bit confusing, but you'll get the hang of it. You'll get into the routine. Those of you who are not in my section M, and there are supposedly hundreds altogether, you will be meeting with your own instructors in your breakout groups later in the week. And again, each of you has your own timetable and your own instructor, whether it's me or one of the other adjunct professors. You'll be meeting with them. I'm Professor Lou Marinoff, by the way, and it's my pleasure to be coordinating these super jumbo Monday plenaries. If you have questions during the actual lecture, which we'll start shortly, then you should definitely pipe up and ask. Otherwise, mute your mics. If you're not asking a question, please mute your mics so we don't hear your phones ringing and your dogs barking and whatever else is going on. It will be easier that way. But I do encourage you to ask questions during the lecture in particular. It's a good thing. Maybe other students have similar questions on their minds. So I always tell my students of philosophy that there's no such thing as a foolish question. Definitely in philosophy, every question is valuable and important. If you ask philosophers enough questions, you're bound to get some foolish answers from us. But in any case, every question is important. So please don't be shy to ask. That's really kind of a number one thing that I like to encourage. Secondly, about the evaluation, I'll be explaining this to my own group in Section M on Thursday morning, because each of your instructors, if you're not enrolled with my group, you're enrolled with another adjunct professor, and each one of them has their own evaluation schema. So how you're going to get graded in this course depends on the section that you're in. Is that clear? So I'll explain to my section M on Thursday how my evaluation will work, but that's in the syllabus anyway that I posted on Blackboard to my group. But each of you will be evaluated. So if you have questions about your evaluation in this course, or how the course is going to run outside of Mondays, please address yourselves to your own instructors, because they're responsible for your particular sections. Is that clear? Everybody okay with that?
So do we know by the email? Because the email that I got, it says 7 p.m.
Well, I don't know what email you got, but basically, yes. So you have to abide by, depending on which, again, there are many sections combined here on Mondays only. And the other section, the other meeting that you'll have with your own particular instructor will be according to the timetable of the college, when you registered for the course, okay?
And it should be on our syllabus, right?
Well, I mean, my syllabus is for my 80 students, and each of you will have your own syllabus for this course, depending again on who your instructor is. So it's a kind of a chicken and egg problem. You need to know which section you're in. The section that you registered for when you go to CUNY first or you go to Blackboard, you will know who the instructor is. And that's the person to whom you should address your questions about your breakout lecture later in the week and about the evaluation of your grade in their section. Okay? Is that clear? And my students, and there are 80 of you in my section M, and when we meet on Thursday at 11 on Blackboard, again, I will explain to you my evaluation schema, but that's just for the 80 of you. There are more than 600 students across the table. Now, not all 600 are here today, and obviously that's because some people are working and some people have scheduling conflicts, but that's not a problem because these lectures are being recorded and they will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. You should have been informed of this, but I'll just tell you anyway that every Monday lecture is going to be uploaded to my YouTube channel for asynchronous viewing. And I posted that link on Blackboard to my students, and your instructors have the URL, so they'll be able to give that to you if they haven't already. So you can go to any of the lectures as the term unfolds and view them or review them at your convenience. This is I think one very good advantage of this online teaching is that indeed students who have a scheduling conflict are not punished for being absent on Monday mornings, but you are responsible for viewing the lecture sooner or later, right? And preferably, since your next breakout lecture this week is going to be built on this lecture this morning, it's obviously in your best interest to see the Monday lecture before you attend your breakout lecture during the week. Otherwise, you may get a bit lost. But if you do them in sequence, you'll be fine. As long as you see the Monday lecture before the second lecture of the week, you'll be on the same page with your instructors. Is that all right? Everybody clear? Yes? Good? Okay. So that's just a bit about the housekeeping. And again, you have to bounce around between Zoom on Mondays and, for my group,
must be cold.
Blackboard on Thursdays, and you have to go to the, YouTube.
In Westchester?
Lectures. Somebody asking a question? If you're not, please mute your mic. Thank you. Okay. So that's step one. Now, step two is about the course itself and about the Monday lectures. We are all following the same plan. So in other words, I'm going to introduce a new philosopher every Monday for the next 6 weeks and, the next 15 weeks. The course is divided into 3 different sections. Let me just share a screen with you to give you a sense of the outline. You should already have this document. It's in the Google Drive folder I provided to my students, but I've shared it as well with your other instructors. So let me have a look and see if I'm able this morning to share things with you. If the software is going to cooperate with me. I have a Monday schedule here, but it doesn't seem to want me to let me share it. So that poses a bit of a problem. Let me see. Why can't I do that? Sometimes Zoom only shows me a certain number of files, and if I have too many things open on my desktop, then it seems not to want me to be able to share everything, So I have this thing open, and it really ought to allow me to. And there it is. Okay, I have to persuade Zoom to cooperate. Okay, you can all see this? Yeah, somebody just say yes or stick up your hand. So yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's great, because when I'm sharing the screen, I don't, I have the chat room open, so I can always, see if you're there. Okay, so in any case, this is the overall plan for the whole term. And these are the Monday lectures and the dates, and also the name of the philosopher or the particular problem that we're going to address later on in section 3. We have puzzles and paradoxes. But for the first bunch of lectures, they're all based on a certain philosopher. And I'm going to deliver lectures every Monday except during spring recess. And so I'm ignoring legal holidays in order to get the curriculum across to you and not to make things more complicated than they already are. I'm simply giving lectures every Monday as indicated, and you're welcome again to join them or indeed to watch them later on YouTube. But that's the plan. And you would be best off if you were to do the reading in advance. So this file is going to be shared. I just wanted you to have a look. Today we're going to focus on Descartes, and this whole week, and the next week Berkeley, and so forth. Almost all these readings are in the required textbook in my section. I think everyone's required the same book. It's good because it has almost everything. And the readings that it doesn't contain, there are very few of them. Berkeley, Hobbes, a couple of other things. Those materials have been provided already to everybody, and you'll be able to get them from your instructors, including myself. So if you have the textbook, you have almost everything you need. If you want to scrounge around online and find the readings, you can do that. It'll just cost you more time, to locate them. But it's a lot more efficient for you if you get the book or rent the book. And I know it can be done very cheaply just to rent it for a semester. But how you do it is up to you. These are the readings for which you're responsible. And again, in a few minutes, we're going to come on to Descartes. So that's just to give you a heads up of where we go with the readings. And the only other thing I want to say to you before we really dive into the course is that my advice to you, and having taught this course for many years to thousands of students over the years, I have a piece of advice, and that is really a rule of thumb. That every hour that we spend in the lecture together, and it's an hour and a half. What is it, an hour and a half this morning? An hour and a quarter? Remind me, we go from 9:30 to 10:45. It's an hour and a quarter. So for every hour and a quarter we spend, if you really want to be on top of the material, you should spend an hour and a quarter of your own time reading and thinking. Okay? So if you're in lectures for 2.5 hours a week total, which you will be with me plus your other instructor, you should spend, rule of thumb, approximately the same amount of time reading the material and thinking about the material. Philosophy is a subject that requires a lot of intellectual or a lot of mental effort. It's not necessarily an easy subject, but it's a very rewarding one. And I will almost guarantee you, no matter what your major is, or whether you're undeclared, whether you're in humanities or sciences or engineering or whichever of the schools or programs that you favor, I guarantee you that what we do in this term, one way or another, will touch on these subjects. We do philosophy of everything. Philosophers invented the academy and invented the curriculum. So we can philosophize about almost anything under the sun. And you may not necessarily relate to or enjoy every single reading that we're going to do, but I've picked ones that usually students find very engaging, and so I'm almost guaranteeing you that at least some of the readings will really speak to you and make you think. So that's really what you need to do, is be willing to invest the time to reflect deeply, and you will then get a lot more out of the course. And also, hopefully, down the road, what you learn in this course is going to help you to better process and succeed in your other courses, whatever they may be. Because by developing your critical reasoning skills, your reading skills, your writing skills, your reflection abilities, and your concentration, which philosophy demands that you do, you will be more successful in all of your studies. So that's just a little bit of food for thought about the course. If you decide you don't have enough time and you want to do things the easy way and cut corners and just show up for class without being prepared, that's your choice. I mean, I'll do my best to explain the readings. I have a reputation for clarity, and I'll try to be clear. But, what you put in is what you get out. So the more you put in, the more you get out of the course. And that's to your benefit. Okay, how many of you, just put your hands up. So how many of you have ever taken a philosophy course before? It's not required. It's not expected. Some of you, I see one hand. Some of you are hiding out back there and not on video, but some of you have. Yeah, first time. Okay. First time. I see a lot of you are saying first time, and that's what we expect. This is a 101. Basically, it's called 10200, but it's basically introductory philosophy course. And indeed, it's not expected that you will have taken a philosophy course. But as I say, by the end of it, I hope that some new realms of thinking will have been open to you. Does high school count? Absolutely. Los Angeles, yes, of course, high school counts. It's very, very few high schools that teach philosophy anymore. But I think it's great. If you've done a high school course, then you may even have heard of some of the philosophers we're going to treat here. And if you have, and then Lainey is saying that you make it difficult. It's difficult for you sometimes. I'm not sure what that means, but she's giving her number. So if you want to speak to people or make friends or join a study group in this class or form a study group amongst yourselves, that's probably a good idea. But in any case, I'm going to do my best to present the material and answer your questions. I know that already we're benefited by being online because the campus is closed. We're in the middle of a snowstorm. So we would have had the problem of the first day of classes being canceled if we were not online. So already I think there's one benefit. We're not going to lose time as long as my internet connection holds up. I mean, if you lose me, you know, that's there's nothing I can do about it. It means my connection's dropped. If you guys lose your internet connections, hopefully mine stays stable long enough to record everything, and then you'll be able to view it later. All right. So in any case, I think it's wonderful that most of you are in your first philosophy course. I like it. In fact, in some ways, I prefer it because every philosopher has their own point of view. It's not so much like mathematics, where, you know, things are pretty objective and value neutral. We're doing philosophy. Some of the content of philosophy is value neutral. Some of it is highly value laden. In the second section, we're going to talk about ethics and justice. It's a very emotional, at times, very value laden topic with what we expect to be a lot of different views. So I don't pretend to be perfectly objective, but I do try to be open-minded and to present things in an even-handed way to you. But I really enjoy teaching students who are taking philosophy for the first time, because I know that no one else has had a chance to brainwash you about philosophy. So I get to be the first. And that way, you know, what I guarantee you one thing, though, that I respect people's beliefs, and I love our First Amendment. I like freedom of expression very much. I defend it. Your opinions are absolutely yours to hold or to change as you see fit, and no one has the right to dictate to you what you should think. But I will challenge you, and that's what philosophers do. We will, whatever you happen to believe, philosophers are very gifted at subverting you. Right, we'll try to make you look more deeply into your convictions to understand why you believe, not just what do you believe, but why do you believe this? Do you have good reasons for believing something to be the case? And if you do, then you may be more deeply committed to your beliefs at the end. And if you don't have really good reasons, then you may want to change them. So that's part of what we do in philosophy, is to shake up your belief system a little bit, make you examine it more closely. From our tradition in the West, and this is, of course, focused on Western philosophy, Socrates very famously talks about the examined life, and said that the examined life is really the best life. So I urge you to pursue this course with a view not only to digesting the material that we're going to cover, but also to reflecting on how this material actually is relevant to your everyday life. And a lot of it is, a lot of it will be. Okay, so that's enough chatter. And some of you are saying other things in the chat room. I'm not quite sure what that is, but you seem to be having an intelligible conversation, so that's fine. If you're getting clear about some of your breakout lectures and so forth, that's very good. Any questions before we actually begin with Descartes?
Yes, please. I just would like to clarify. So I have for the class discussion, Professor Finblum on Wednesdays.
Yep.
He provided a bunch of, readings, and all are available online. But you also mentioned a textbook that we can rent. I'm not sure if it's, additional to those readings that he posted. I mean, that he shared through Blackboard, or it's whatever was shared in Blackboard already included in that.
Right. Well, you should ask him again if you have questions about your particular other section with your main instructor. I'm not the main instructor, I'm the plenary instructor. But if you're registered with Professor Finblum and you have questions about the materials he's provided and the readings he's requiring, you should address them to him. Okay. In the first.
All right, but for this class, we'll be referring to those.
Well, they're supposed to be building on the Monday lecture, so we're not trying to confuse you here. And he's done it before. We ran this last term for the first time. We did it this way with more than 600 students in the plenary, and then all the breakout groups with 6 or 7 different instructors, and it seemed to work pretty well. The feedback we got was that everybody was really happy to hear not only one voice but 2. Remember, normally in any course, you're hearing one professor's voice. and that's fine. But in this course, you get a chance to hear my voice on Mondays and then a different voice with your other adjunct. If you're in my section, you're going to hear me twice, but that's okay too. The main thing is to hear a different voice is not a bad thing. It's probably a good thing in philosophy. To hear someone else's interpretation of the same material is only going to enrich your own perspective. And the other huge advantage that we got as feedback from students during the evaluation that went on was that everyone was really happy to have the asynchronous learning. So in other words, by doing this online, recording the lectures and making them available, the students found it very beneficial to be able to review lectures, which you can never do in a live room. You hear it once and you're done. This way you get to review a lecture or a part of a lecture, and you can also obviously see a lecture that you missed on your own time. So I think this gives you a certain advantage. I'm not taking attendance in my group. There are a number of reasons for it. We're saying attendance is mandatory, meaning either synchronously or asynchronously. We're expecting you to watch or to be in the lectures, but I can't take attendance fairly because if people, for example, dial in, they do so anonymously. There's a dial in. Some people don't have great internet, so they're dialing in, and we don't see who they are when they dial in with their phones. So it's just not fair to be taking attendance. It's also not practical. But that said, we still expect you to attend or to view asynchronously. Is this clear?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, you're very welcome. All right. Well, in that case, let's begin. And we're beginning with Renee Descartes. And some of you may have heard. Has anybody heard of Renee Descartes? Anybody know the name Descartes? Some of you were nodding. Good. Okay. So you must know something about him. He's the so-called father of modern philosophy. So we're starting with him because he provides a very interesting and fruitful departure point for the first part of this course. Let me just...
Professor.
Yes?
Yeah, sorry. I heard about him, but it was about mathematics, something about the Cartesian plane.
Yes.
But I didn't have an idea that he was a philosopher.
Well, there you go. He was not just a philosopher. He was a logician and also a mathematician. And I'll enter. I'm going to I don't know who just spoke. There's so many of you. I'm not picking everybody up on the screen. But some of you, as you've just said, I don't know. Could you tell me your name?
Rosemary.
Okay, thank you. So I'm typing in what he's very famous for that you've already heard of. And that's not philosophy, it's mathematics. Cartesian coordinates, which I've misspelled. Let me retype. Cartesian coordinates, which are basically essential to doing any kind of calculus, essential to doing analytical geometry. What Descartes did was he took Euclidean geometry, which was the gold standard for mathematics since the time of Euclid, I guess 300 BC or so, and he invented this algebraic system. You know them as XY coordinates, right? But it's coordinates, they're called Cartesian after Descartes. Indeed, you could do them in more than 2 dimensions. But this is a very powerful way of converting converting geometry into algebra and in representing many kinds of mathematical forms. So that's part of his work. He's really a very important thinker. We're going to be looking at his philosophy today, but you're absolutely right that he's extremely well known for his mathematics and his contributions, particularly with that coordinate system. Somebody's asking if you need to buy a textbook. Listen, you must understand that the syllabus in your course tells you everything. I cannot repeat the answers to, I took questions at the beginning. These are required readings as a required text, and that information was given to you long ago and posted on Blackboard. In my case, I sent it around to everybody and posted it. You need to ask your instructor or go to your Blackboard page, and that information should be there. The readings that we're going to do are all contained in the text that I've required, okay? And you can rent that text, you don't have to buy it. All right, we're going to begin with Descartes in order to get into the subject matter. So let's go to the actual reading, which I'm going to share with you, if I can. Again, I've got it open and highlighted. So just let me see if the Blackboard will be rather if Zoom will be cooperative and let me share this. I'm going to set up the reading before we actually go there, because I want to explain to you some new terminology. In philosophy, we have a specific vocabulary for particular areas of inquiry, and I'm going to try to share an overview with you, which is here. The first new word for today is called epistemology. Does anybody know what it means? Is this the first time you're hearing the word epistemology? Let me look at the chat room. Some of you, okay, that's fine. The word epistemology really means philosophy of knowledge. Okay, you hearing me? Epistemology means philosophy of knowledge. This is really part of what we're going to be covering in this first group of readings. And there are really two main branches that we're going to be contrasting in our first 2 weeks. And the first branch is called rationalism. Descartes is a rationalist. Plato was a rationalist. There are many rationalists in the history of philosophy, and that's contrasted with empiricism. Please don't confuse that word. It's not imperialism, it's empiricism. So these may be new terms to you. That's why I'm introducing them. They're very important. And both rationalism and empiricism are branches of philosophy of knowledge, branches of epistemology. And what rationalists believe, or what rationalists claim on the whole, is that there are significant ways in which our concepts and knowledge are gained independently of sense experience. So in other words, how do we come to know things? This is a fundamental question. What is knowledge, and how do we acquire knowledge, and how do we know if our knowledge is accurate? Well, it's a very important question for philosophers and also for scientists and also for people in everyday life. Especially since we're swimming in seas of disinformation and misinformation and all kinds of chaos. Data, we're all drowning in data, but how do we know what's true? And how do we know where the data comes from? And how do we know what to believe or not? It's all part of this question of knowledge. Rationalists believe that we can use the power of our minds, essentially, to assert that valid concepts and valid knowledge are gained independently of sense experience means that we're not depending on our five senses exclusively or at all to gain knowledge, that we're actually going to be able to gain knowledge with our minds alone. And that's the rationalist claim, that ultimately it's the mind that is responsible for acquiring knowledge and not the senses. Empiricists take a completely different view. Empiricists claim that sense experience is the ultimate source of all our concepts and knowledge. In other words, that we need our five senses, or at least most of them, on a given day in order to get any knowledge at all. If we didn't have any senses, if we were deprived of the ability to see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, we wouldn't be able to know anything at all. That's the empiricist claim. So already you could see these are two very different views of how we acquire knowledge. And in the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at an exemplary spokesperson for each of them. This week, Descartes, who's a great rationalist. And then next week, Berkeley, spelled Berkeley, like in California, but pronounced Barclay, who's a very great and radical empiricist. In fact, they're both radicals, but Descartes' a radical rationalist, if you like, and Berkeley next week is a radical empiricist. So this already is going to give you a really important window onto this debate about where knowledge comes from and what it is. Okay. So that's the game plan actually for this week and next, Descartes and then Berkeley. All right. So let's have a look at Descartes. Try and share that too. We'll see if my luck holds with the screen sharing. And there it is. So you all see this? Good.
Yes.
This is from your textbook, Meditations on First Philosophy. And there are 6 of them. They're very short. We're only going to cover the first 2. You may read the others at your leisure or for your interest. But we are going to be responsible for the first two meditations. I'm going to cover the first one with you this morning. And then in your breakout group, presumably you'll be covering the second one. I will certainly cover the second one on Thursday with my own section. So Descartes lived, as you can see, was born in the very late 16th century and lived to the middle of the 17th. And that's called the early modern period. It's prior to the Enlightenment. Some of you may have heard of the Enlightenment if you've done, world civilization, world history. The period just prior is called early modern. The Enlightenment is really the beginning of modern, today what we call modern philosophy. But just prior to that was this really important bridge between medieval and modern. It's called early modern, and that's Descartes' time. This was the time of Galileo, the time of Hobbes, the time of Spinoza. There were some of the outstanding philosophers of this period, and they were very, very far-seeing. They were really ahead of their time in certain ways and got into trouble because of it. Philosophers tend to get into trouble sometimes for thinking unapproved thoughts or thinking thoughts which somehow are viewed as heterodox, but later become viewed as normal. This is part of what we do. So Descartes is thought of as the father of modern philosophy. And as you can see, he wrote on mathematics and physics. Some of you already know this. But the Meditations is a work on epistemology, and it's very radical. Descartes is called a skeptic. I highlighted that word. What is a skeptic? Can anyone say or enter in the chat room what a skeptic is?
It's something that you're not sure about, like you think about it, like, no, maybe, but no.
Exactly. Very good. That's exactly right. A skeptic is someone who doubts. Okay, someone who
questionable.
Okay, is that what you were going to say? Something who doubts. Yeah, you question everything. Very good. Very good. You question. Yes, that's a skeptic. And there's something called healthy skepticism. Yes, you've heard the phrase healthy skepticism. It means you shouldn't believe everything that you hear, right? If we believed everything we heard, we'd be in trouble, presumably. So sometimes it's very important to question. Descartes did question everything. And he was such a radical skeptic. He's going to question more than you probably yourselves have ever questioned. He's going to do that in the very first meditation. So he's going to use skepticism as an instrument of inquiry, and we're going to see where it leads him. So let's see if you can relate to this very first paragraph where he says, on what can be called into doubt? Well, so he's asking this question, what can we doubt? And I also will say to you one thing before we dive into this. You know that philosophy and religion have a very interesting relationship. Historically, many philosophers were very religious in the past and in the present too. Every religion contains philosophy. You probably know this. If you belong to a particular religion, then you'll know that there's philosophical content inside it, usually moral guidance and other kinds of things. But philosophy and religion have a lot of common ground. Religions have absorbed various philosophies into their theology. So religion and philosophy go hand in glove a long way. But then again, there's also a difference because arguably one might say that religion is faith-based. Yes, if you are a religious person, it means it's fair to say that you have faith. Yeah, you probably have faith of some kind. And when people, if people lose their faith, they lose their religion. So we could associate with religious belief something about faith. And philosophy is the other side of the coin in a certain way, because philosophy is often more about doubt. So people who are religious like to have faith, and they utilize faith, and philosophers like to doubt. We like to have doubt, and we like to utilize doubt. And they're not mutually exclusive. It's possible to have faith in certain things and also to doubt other things. So if you really have strong faith, you don't mind doubt, I think. And if you really have strong doubt, you probably don't mind faith either. Descartes believed in God, as it happens, but he had very strong doubt, and he expressed it. Okay, so that's just something you want to consider, an interesting relationship between faith and doubt. And some of you were saying you used to question everything as a kid, and your mother told you, one of you said that no one is right all the time, so you have to question everything. Yes, that's what Descartes wants to do, is to question everything. And so he does. And children are very philosophical. Children are full of questions. And often the system discourages them. from questioning too much, because they ask too many questions. People don't always have the answers. So in any case, well, we'll see if everyone has a different truth. Someone just said everyone has a different truth. We'll find out about that in a moment. Okay. I think there are some truths which are absolutely shared, and there may be other areas where we disagree on what's true or not. But this is where Descartes will lead us. So he says, and I'm just reading the first paragraph. You can read it for yourselves. For several years now, I have been aware that I accepted many falsehoods as true in my youth, that what I built on the foundations of those falsehoods was dubious, meaning doubtful. Yeah, dubious means doubtful. And therefore that once in my life, I would need to tear down everything and begin anew from the foundations if I wanted to establish any firm and lasting knowledge. So he's reflecting as an adult that he was told many untrue things, which he accepted as true. And now if he really wants to have firm and lasting knowledge, he has to be willing to doubt everything and then rebuild his edifice of knowledge. Okay? Some of you were saying questions get you in trouble because children are brutally honest. Yeah, sometimes they are, and they're ruthless. Well, in a certain way, they also are born. I believe children are born without prejudices and without biases, and that they acquire these things. So questions. That's why I always welcome questioning in a philosophy class, because to me it's always a wholesome thing to be willing to question and not suppose that we already have all the answers. So in any case, I like children because they have open minds when they question. Which page number is this? Well, I don't know, because it depends on your edition, right? So it's page 170 in my edition. Believe me, there's a table of contents, and I'm assuming that you don't need to have taken a philosophy course to be able to use a table of contents and find the reading, okay? In my edition, which is maybe not even the latest one, you'll find Descartes here in the section on what? Part 3, knowledge and reality. Okay, there's Descartes. So depends, page number depends on your section. So don't worry about the page number, worry about the reading. All right, so he wants to call into question these things that he's been told in his youth. How many of you were told things in your youth that you now realize are not true?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me an example.
Like, for instance, Santa Claus, the belief that he leaves money under your pillow, when it's actually in reality your parents that leave money under there. So there, I don't know. So yeah, that's one thing.
Santa Claus is a great example because they use Santa Claus to control you, right? They tell you if you're good, Santa will bring you presents, don't they?
My brother told me not to eat cauliflower because it's sick, rotten broccoli. I was scared of
okay.
cauliflower.
All right. So, yeah, there's a good myth. Cauliflower is actually rotten broccoli. That's a good one. I haven't heard that one before. Then somebody mentioned the tooth fairy, right? That's very good, isn't it? That kind of takes the sting out of losing your tooth. Oh, you're going to get rewarded for it, like the tooth fairy and so forth. So, or you came up ghosts, there's all kinds of spaghetti turned into snakes, the Easter bunny. I love it. You guys are coming up with wonderful examples of some of the nonsense that people tell children, which actually has some use, right? We tell children stories sometimes to control them better, to try to control them, don't we? We want, children to be behaved at times. So we tell them stories which will hopefully elicit what we deem to be good behavior from them and so forth. All right. But Descartes is obviously implying this kind of thing, that he was told many things in his youth that he believed to be true, which are obviously false. And if you extrapolate that to the present time, you'll realize that this goes on. It doesn't stop. We're not at the end of being told falsehoods. In fact, every news station wants to tell you its version of the truth. No matter which news station you want to listen to, you're going to get some version of what it believes is true or what it wants you to believe is true. And Descartes asking this very important question. If I want firm and lasting knowledge, which means true knowledge, then I really have to disbelieve everything and then build it all up again from the beginning. And so he will, because he's a radical skeptic, he's saying that, yes, unlearn what you've learned. That's right. Start again, start fresh, and try to retain only those things which you have good reason to believe to be true. So he says, I ought, therefore, this is highlighted, right? I ought to withhold my assent just as carefully from what is not obviously certain and indubitable, meaning cannot be doubted, as from what is obviously false. So I can justify the rejection of all my beliefs if I find some ground for doubt in each. And so what he's saying is that if we think about knowledge as divisible into three categories, that is true on the one hand, false on the other hand, and in the middle we have this uncertain. I'll give you some examples momentarily. There are obviously things we believe to be true, there are things we believe to be false, but in the middle there's a whole lot of other claims that we don't really know for sure whether they're true or false, so we consider them to be uncertain. And he is willing to reject those two. He wants to hang on at the end only to true beliefs. So he's going to reject false beliefs because they're false, but he's also, because of a radical, a skeptical view, he's going to reject even the uncertain beliefs, just in case they turn out to be false. He doesn't want to have uncertain beliefs in case they turn out to be false. He just wants true beliefs. It's a very ambitious project, but that's what he's trying to do. And then he goes on, and this is where in the next highlight, he will clearly disclose that he's a rationalist. He's going to reject the senses. Of course, he says, whatever I have so far accepted as supremely true, I have learned either from the senses or through the senses. Meaning, again, our normally five senses, right? Sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. So he says, I've learned all these things mostly from the senses, but I have occasionally caught the senses deceiving me. And it would be prudent for me never completely to trust those who have cheated me even once. So can you think of examples? Now I'm going to ask you to think a little harder. Have your senses ever deceived you?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All the time.
Okay, how about an example?
I have one. The other day I was walking home from work and I thought the store was closed because I was like 1 block away. But when I got closer, I saw that it was a truck in front of the store and it was actually open.
Yeah, but you somehow assumed it was closed?
Yeah, because I couldn't see the inside of the store like I usually could.
Right. Well, that's a case of not seeing something, but okay, you made an assumption because you couldn't see
I
something.
have
So
an
you
example.
were depending on your senses, right? Another example, some of you are giving other examples.
So like if you put something in water, like
sorry?
when you look at it, so when you,
Yeah.
let's say you put something in water, like if you look at it, it looks bigger and distorted.
Sure.
But when you take it out, it looks different. So that's
That's
like
right.
the optical
Sure.
illusion that your mind
Alexandra just generalized this, right? She said optical illusions. The world is full of optical illusions, yes? Psychology books are full of them too. There are mirages, there are hallucinations. Déjà vu is not really the same thing, Min, because déjà vu means literally seeing something that's already been seen. That's a different kind of thing where we have an experience and we have a sense that we've already had that experience. So that's a different thing. But we're talking here about the senses deceiving us. Dreaming is an interesting example. And sometimes dreams can be very real. Have any of you ever awakened from a nightmare because you were really frightened?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really feels real at times, right?
Yeah.
Or you have a wish fulfilling dream. The flip side is you're having a dream that's so good you don't want to wake up, right? Okay, so basically there are lots of ways. And it's not just
Excuse me, Professor, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I want when you say senses, I know it says your 5 senses, right?
Yep. Yep.
But are your senses the same thing as, I'm trying to word it right, maybe your spirit or your energy, is that the same thing?
No, not for our purposes. We're talking about the senses as perceptual gateways, okay? We're talking about the senses as gateways to what we normally think of as the external world. So the job of the senses is to take information in and to send it to the brain, okay? To give us information about what's going on around us, okay? So you can think of them as portals. We take information through the eyes, right? From the outside, through the ears, through the nose, through the taste buds, and through the sense of touch. All those things are like gateways that are sending data to our brains. And those data are basically telling us important things about the world that we're immersed in as embodied beings. So that's what I mean, and that's what most people mean by the five senses. Is this clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, welcome. So Descartes is saying that a lot of what he's learned has come from the senses, and the senses sometimes deceive us. So therefore, he says it would be prudent never. This is the skeptical move. This is where he gets radical. He says, because my senses have sometimes deceived me, I can never really trust them, because I don't know any longer if I'm going to be a radical skeptic, then how can I really tell when my senses are deceiving me and when they're not? And his answer is, I can't really know for sure. So I'm going to reject the evidence of the senses because I really can't trust them. And that is why he's a rationalist and not an empiricist. He really rejects the evidence of the senses as being viable evidence for what's really going on. And so he will confine himself to rationalism. And if you want to think about a kind of a social analogy, I could ask you, I'm trying to now play devil's advocate and convince you of why Descartes is so skeptical. If somebody, let's say in a relationship that somebody deceived you, okay, even just once, would you ever really trust that person again?
Not fully.
Okay, somebody says no. A lot of you are saying no. Most of you are saying no. And I think that's the response that we are kind of hardwired to come up with. If someone deceives us even once, then it becomes hard for us to trust that person. Yeah, trust is hard to build, but it's very easy to shatter. Yes, that's exactly right, unless they gain it back. So trust is hard to build and easy to shatter. And if you think about it in Descartes' epistemological context, he's saying the same thing about the senses. The senses deceive him, his own senses deceive him, and so he can't really trust them. And that's the moral of what he's trying to say to us, that his senses cannot fully be trusted. Let's go then to the next page. And so here, and some of you have already anticipated this, which is great. He says, how often a dream has convinced me that I was here, sitting before the fire wearing my dressing gown, when in fact I was undressed in between the covers of my bed. I mean, he sometimes can't tell the difference between a dream and a waking state. And some of us have experienced that too. Most of us probably. Then he says, when I think very carefully about this, I see so plainly that there are no reliable signs by which I can distinguish sleeping from waking, that I am stupefied, and my stupor suggests that I am asleep. Well, let me ask you a question. If you really want to think about it, you may partly agree or fully agree with Descartes that it's very difficult for us at times to distinguish sleeping from waking. But that also leads to a more horrific kind of thought, that maybe what we think of as being awake is just another kind of sleep. Maybe we're all dreaming that we're here right now. We're having a shared hallucination. Alyssa, you're laughing, but it's true. How do we really know? How could we really know for sure that we're not in some other kind of a dream?
Matrix.
The Matrix, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Bingo,
Yeah,
great. You're right, exactly. Your archery is very good. You're totally on the ball. If any of this made you think of the Matrix, that's exactly what the Matrix is about.
I was thinking of another movie that's called Inception. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yes, that one too. It's newer. Yep, that's right. I saw it. It's really interesting. It's based on the same thing. So give Descartes some credit. I hope this gives you a little respect for this guy who wrote this in 1634. I mean, this is 1634 is when the first editions of this Meditations were published. So this is long before Hollywood. This is long before movies, long before special effects. But he actually realized this. Yes.
Professor, I'm sorry, Professor Marinoff, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
This made me think of how we all interpret and have different realities, because in high school, when I was like in 10th grade, I remember reading about goldfish and how they have a different reality than from what we perceive. So maybe this could all be not real, because you got to think of science and like quantum physics and stuff. Like maybe there's another reality which proves our reality doesn't exist. So there's like a lot of it might be I want to use that word, but I don't know if I'm going to use it right. It might be indubitable. Like maybe you can't prove it, but like since there might be another world, because I believe in alternate realities, and there's proof for that. And there, since there might be another reality, maybe our reality is just a simulation, like someone, I think
Right.
Jacqueline said. Yeah.
Well, and I think that if you follow, especially modern physics, it's astounding because we keep finding out from science that the world is continuously a much stranger place than we imagined, right? I mean, the universe we live in on every scale, whether it's the cosmological scale or whether it's, subatomic scale or quantum scale, the things that science tells us are unbelievable. It's stranger than any science fiction. In fact, all science fiction most science fiction turns out to be just prediction of what science is later going to discover, right?
Professor.
So the world is a stranger place than we dream or than we think. And this is why Descartes is questioning, the actual reality around him. And I think it's not a bad thing. Just don't do it in every class, but it's okay to do it in philosophy class. Okay. We have to believe some things to get through the day. But I'm glad that you can appreciate and that Descartes' skepticism has made you think about The Matrix and Inception and other movies, which are treating exactly the same thing. But I want to move on now to something very important, because he is going to distinguish two different kinds of knowledge, and he's going to argue now through reflection that there is one kind of knowledge that appears to be a little bit more certain. And once again, it should not surprise you to learn that that's the knowledge we get from our minds and not from our senses. So here's the paragraph in question. He says, perhaps we can correctly infer that while physics, astronomy, medicine, and other disciplines requiring the study of composites are dubious, disciplines like arithmetic and geometry, which deal only with completely simple and universal things without regard to whether they exist in the world, are somehow certain and indubitable. Whether we are awake or asleep, 2 + 3 is always 5, and the square never has more than 4 sides. It seems impossible even to suspect such obvious truths of falsity. So Descartes is now dividing knowledge really into knowledge of things that are kind of mental conceptions that have nothing to do with the world and don't come through the senses. So you could do arithmetic in your mind without having any external senses. And he says all the other things that we need our senses to study, he gives you examples here, the physics, astronomy, medicine, biology, chemistry, all the engineering, all the sciences that deal with things in the world are dealing with what he calls composite things. And these things are dubious and very hard to get to the bottom of. But these simple and universal things like arithmetic and geometry seem to deliver truths to us which really are indubitable, whether we're sleeping or waking. So he's going to tend to believe that more than he believes all the evidence of the senses that comes through scientific investigation. So that's really important. And let me give you a quick example. I'll try and share a little table with you, just the second half of this slide. Let me see if I can share this. So what Descartes is doing is actually he's going to divide knowledge, as we've already mentioned, into 3 categories. Things which are known to be true necessarily, and things which are known to be false necessarily, and things which are uncertain. And he's going to reject, remember, he's also going to reject what's uncertain. But I want to give you a quick look here at these 3 categories, but also 2 different kinds of truth. There are many kinds of truths in philosophy. Don't think for a second that truth is a simple concept. It's not. And we could spend a whole course. We could spend easily a whole course just on the subject of truth. There's some really interesting books. There are many, many kinds of truth, dozens of kinds of truths that we could discuss. And probably if you took a course on truth, you might end up believing less about truth than when you started. But here's Descartes' example. I'm giving you very simple breakdown, minimally, of 2 kinds of truths, necessary and contingent, and I'll explain the difference. A necessary truth can never be false. So that's clear, okay? Necessary truth is true in all circumstances. And for Descartes, he's just told us that things like 1 + 1 = 2, or a square has 4 sides, or a triangle has 3 sides, or a circle has 360 degrees, those are necessary truths. They're true whether we're awake or whether we're asleep. They're true on the moon. They're true on different planets. 1 + 1 is always true. It's true necessarily. And the other kind of truth that we could distinguish at this stage is contingent truth. So a contingent truth may be true, but it's true only in particular circumstances. And it may become false when circumstances change. So it could be true in the past, but not true now. Or it could be untrue now, but could become true in the future. An example of a contingent truth would be Albany is the capital of New York State. Now, some of you know that that was not always the case, right? There were other capitals of New York State before Albany. So it's true now, but that means it's only contingently true because it was not always true. And in fact, if we ask a silly question, what was the capital of New York State during the last ice age? We get a ridiculous answer. Well, there was no New York State during the last ice age, so it didn't have a capital. So, Albany is the capital of New York State is a contingent truth. It's true now, but it wasn't always true. And for all we know, it won't be true in the future. Could change, right? So I hope that's useful to you to understand Descartes' program. Descartes wants only to keep necessary truths, actually. What's contingently true is true for us, but Descartes is a little more suspect of contingent truths because they are also things that we get from our senses in the external world. But just to be clear, what's necessarily true is going to be something Descartes accepts, and that will turn out only to be things like mathematics and logic, because they're the truths the mind produces, independent of the senses. That's a rationalist position. What would be false? For Descartes, 1 + 1 is 3, would be a false statement. And what would be uncertain? Well, x + y = 2. If I ask you whether x + y = 2 is true or not, what are you going to tell me? There's only one thing you could say, right? You could say it depends on the values of x and y, correct? Some values of x and y will make that statement true, and other values of x and y will make that statement false, right? So it's therefore uncertain. And so Descartes will not accept it as true. And similarly, if we say New York City will again become the capital of New York State, nobody knows whether that's going to happen or not. New York City once was the capital. So was Kingston. So were, I think, other places. So we don't know. So it's uncertain. But what Descartes is interested in only are true claims. And moreover, between necessary and contingent truths, Descartes is really only going to accept necessarily true claims because the contingently true ones come from the senses, and he's so radical that he's going to reject that too. Clear? Everybody clear? So if you divide knowledge into 3, you divide claims into 3, you'll get true claims, and you'll get uncertain claims, you get false claims. So Descartes obviously wants to reject what's false. And also, because he's a radical skeptic, he's going to reject what's uncertain, just in case it turns out to be false. So he's only going to retain what's true. And between necessary and contingent truths, he's going to reject contingent truths. Most of us need them, okay, but to get through the day. But Descartes wants only to retain what's necessarily true, and that's going to turn out to be mostly logical truths. Although there's one very important truth he's going to stumble on, as we'll see in meditation too, which is actually not a logical truth, but an existential truth, and we'll come to it. All right. So, are we clear so far? And we can just finish this reading in the next few minutes, at least meditation 1, and then I'm going to have discussion with you in the remaining time and try to answer questions that may have arisen. So let's just go back to the reading for the time being, if Zoom will let me go there. I think so. All right. So you understand the distinction, right? That the sciences are based on external things. When we study science, we're studying external objects. He calls them composites. Whether you're doing biology or chemistry or physics, that is experimental physics, or you're doing engineering or whatever it is, sociology, you're studying external things. So again, your evidence of those things comes through the senses. And so Descartes says they're dubious. There's no way out. They're going to be doubtful. So on the other hand, disciplines like arithmetic and geometry, in other words, mathematics, are dealing only with simple and universal things without regard to their existence. In other words, we don't care whether actually triangles exist. We know that they have three sides, whether they exist or not. They're, if you like, objects of our mind, they're conceptions. But somehow, because they're conceptions, they're indubitable. These conceptions of mathematical objects are indubitable. And so he has every reason to have confidence in claims of mathematics and logic. So now he will take this skepticism a little further, and don't take him literally. He does believe in God as it happens, okay? He does. But he says, how do I know? Now he's being very radical skeptic, and runs the risk of getting himself into a little bit of trouble too on account of it. But he says, how do I know that God hasn't, in fact, deceived me for whatever reason? How do I know, says Descartes, that there is actually no earth at all, no sky, no extended thing, no shape, no magnitude, no place? All of these things that seem to exist don't really exist. How can I know that for sure? How do we really know that everything that we think exists in the world, including ourselves, is not just a dream of some kind?
I feel like you can do the scientific method. I don't know.
Well, let me put it in a modern context. Suppose we took a brain. You can't do this. Don't try this at home. But if we took a brain in a vat and we hooked it up with inputs, couldn't we stimulate that brain to, if we stimulated its visual cortex, couldn't we make it believe it was seeing things that weren't really there by adjusting the inputs? If we stimulated the auditory cortex.
Wait, how can a brain see? I'm so confused.
Absolutely. We could feed a brain all kinds of inputs that would simulate things that aren't there at all. We almost have the technology to do that. Has anybody seen the movie Total Recall? That's a good one too, because it's I won't spoil the story, but the story is part of the storyline of Total. Yeah. Part of the storyline is that they figure out a way to implant memory in you. So if you can't afford to go to Hawaii for a vacation, you go into this office, they put you in a booth, they give you a tan like you've been on the beach, and then they implant in your brain a chip that has all the memories of this wonderful holiday in Hawaii. And then you walk out of that place thinking you really were in Hawaii. And what's the difference? Between, if you actually remembered something, then you really thought it happened, didn't you? And if your memory could be manipulated, I'm not saying this is a conspiracy theorist, I'm just saying as a scientific possibility, if your memory could be manipulated, then you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between what you really experienced and remembered having experienced and what someone stuck into your brain as a kind of a false experience, as just a program you're running.
Don't we also just revise our memories like as we go? And
absolutely, or you better believe that. And if you're a psychology student, you know that everything is filtered. Everything is filtered. That's famously why 12 eyewitnesses all see something different. Isn't it amazing? It always happens this way, right? You have all these eyewitnesses and everybody gives you a different story. That's because we all filter our perceptions. It's not the fact that we see clearly what we're seeing. Everything gets filtered and interpreted. So different people will see the same thing, but come up with a different description of it. And that's another good reason why Descartes doesn't trust his senses. Yeah. I hope I'm making you see that he's relevant in that way. He understood this. So now he's pushing it really far. I mean, just to wrap up the first meditation, he's doing what we would today call pushing the envelope. He's saying, suppose that I really can't believe anything. Suppose that God is not supremely good, because normally most people who believe in God believe that God is a supremely good being, as well as all-knowing and all-powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent. Normally, people think of God as being all good. But Descartes says, but suppose, for the sake of argument, like being devil's advocate, he says, I suppose not that there's a supremely good God who is the source of all truth, but there's an evil demon. Suppose not God, but there's some evil demon, supremely powerful and cunning, who works as hard as he can to deceive me. And if that were the case, then he says, how about this? If that supremely powerful demon is deceiving me, then maybe sky, air, earth, color, shape, sound, and other external things are just dreamed illusions, which the demon uses to ensnare my judgment. I will regard myself as not having hands, eyes, flesh, bone, and senses. Even his own body could be part of that illusion, but only a cluster of false beliefs about these things. And so he really needs to get to the bottom of this. And as he says, if I do not really have the ability to know the truth, I will at least withhold assent from what is false and from what a deceiver may try to put over on me, however powerful and cunning he may be. And that's really where Descartes leaves us. He's saying, in fact, it seems possible to doubt even the reality of our own existence. In the 20th century, a very famous philosopher called Bertrand Russell said something similar. He was also very skeptical and a great rationalist. Russell said, if the universe and everything in it had been created 5 minutes ago, we would never know the difference. The thought for the day, okay? Because we have all this geological evidence, right? Archaeological evidence, cosmological evidence. We think we know, the age of the universe, the age of the sun, the age of the planets, the age of different species on this earth, right? The age of humanoids, and all these records we find through various sciences. We can do argon dating, carbon dating. We think we can date things back, thousands and millions of years. But suppose everything had just been made like that 5 minutes ago. That's Descartes' line of speculation. If everything had just been made like that 5 minutes ago, we would never know the difference. So it's possible to doubt almost everything about reality if you're skeptical enough. I'm not trying to depress you. I'm just trying to make you think like Descartes, okay? The class will soon be over. You can go back to normal. But Descartes is trying to make us really see how it's possible for us all to be deceived about the external world. Is that clear? That much is clear? And uncertainty makes life more exciting. Well, it does at times. I will grant you that. Which philosopher said that? What I just mentioned to you about the universe created 5 minutes ago? That was Bertrand Russell. I'll type his name in. Okay? The one who said that if the...
So, Professor, what are your thoughts on the concept of if a tree falls and no one's around to hear it, did it really
Okay,
fall?
we'll get to that. That's a great question. We're going to get to that next week. I don't know why everybody knows this. This is like the one thing about philosophy that everybody, this thing still circulates. I'm very glad to hear you ask. If a tree falls in the forest, there's no one's there around, does it make a sound? The bottom line is that the philosopher we're going to look at next week, namely Berkeley, is a complete opposite of Descartes. He's just as skeptical, but he's a total empiricist. And what Berkeley believes is that existence depends entirely on perception, and that if we couldn't perceive anything, nothing would exist. So the two of them would give very different answers to that question. Hold that question. We'll come back to it next week, all right? And I'll give you an answer that is equally unbelievable. I'm going to give you Berkeley's answer. But in the meantime, that it was Bertrand Russell who said that if the universe had been created 5 minutes ago, as it is, with everything in it as it is, we would never be able to know the difference. Yes, don't tell this to your chemistry professor. We don't want to upset the other professors by making them think philosophically. I'm just teasing. But you have to, reserve your wildest imagination for philosophy class. That's a good place for it. And when you're studying the sciences, certainly You should study them very seriously. And I did too. I did my first degree in physics, and I'm very fond of science, but I'm also able to appreciate Descartes' skepticism, and I'm sure that you would be able to also, right? Fair to say? You can balance, I hope you can balance your experience of life, but also allow your minds to be opened a little bit by this line of skeptical inquiry. All right, any questions about the first meditation?
I have a question, Professor.
Please.
Not really a question, but kind of refute. So you said Descartes believes 1 + 1 is 2, right?
I can't quite hear you. Is that who's speaking? Is that De Silva?
Yes.
Could you speak a little bit closer to your microphone?
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little bit better. It's not great, but I'll try. Or
Sorry.
type it in, one of the two.
It's quite long, so
That's much better. Suddenly.
okay. So you said Descartes believes in facts like 1 + 1 is 2, right?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So when I was in high school, I had a further mathematics professor prove 1 + 1 is 1.
Did he prove that to you?
Yes, using 1 as the imaginary number I.
Okay.
Oh my.
Okay, so let me qualify this. I think that one could, for example, easily prove, I don't know how to prove that 1 + 1 is 1, but I could certainly prove that 1 + 1 equals 10. Okay, 1 + 1 equals 10, but in what system is 1 + 1 equal to 10? Some of you know.
Oh, x + 1 = 10.
Binary, right? In binary math, yeah?
Yes.
In digital math, 1 + 1 is 10. We use a base 10, right? In base 10 arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 2. Okay? In binary, which is base 2, binary means base 2. In base 2 arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 10. But they're not two different numbers because 10 is binary for 2.
Sure.
So they're not, these things are not numbers, these are representations of quantities. This is a more complicated issue. But what we use as numerals, these things are called numerals, whether we're using Roman numerals, right, or Arabic numerals, or whatever kind of numeral system you want to use, we're representing quantities with them. Now, the representations may be different, but the things that they represent are not different. Okay, because in base 2, 10 is this quantity. Okay, in base 10, 2 is this quantity. It represents the same quantity. It's just a different way of representing. So there are many base systems. The Babylonians used base 60. Ancient Babylonians used base 60. That's why we still have, if you're wondering why we have 60 minutes to the hour and 60 seconds to the minute, and therefore 3,600, seconds in an hour, that comes from base 60 arithmetic. And that's also why we have 360 degrees in a circle. It's arbitrary, right? If we use radian measure, we have pi radians, yes?
Yes.
No, it's just a question of which measure you want to use. But it's not the case that one of them is true and the other is false. They are representations of the same thing. And the thing that they represent is, for Descartes, necessarily and universally true, because it's an abstract truth of the mind.
But my thing is, the way we learn these facts are through the senses.
Ah, that's a very interesting observation. In other words, you heard them, right?
Yeah, you heard.
You heard them. I like that comment very much. So how do we trust arithmetic then? Because we learned it just the same as we learned chemistry or geography, right?
Yes.
Excellent point. I'll give you an answer now in brief because we only have 2 minutes, but we'll take it up again and you can take it up later. There's a wonderful example. Helen Keller. Does anybody know about her?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So she was deaf and blind as a child. Imagine that she faced this huge disability. Helen Keller faced this enormous disability as a baby. She was both deaf and blind. How did she ever learn, as it happens, English? She learned to speak and write English. How could she ever learn a language being deaf and blind? That's unbelievable, right? Could you turn off your mics, please? Could you mute your mic, whoever that is? Thank you. So I will give you the short answer, and this is Descartes. Descartes would love this. He, of course, didn't know about her. She had a caregiver named, it's touch, but it's beyond touch. She had a caregiver named Anne Sullivan who was trying to teach her that things had names. And she was a little baby, a little child. And so Anne Sullivan was pouring water on one hand. She had her hands outstretched. One hand, she's pouring water. And the other hand, she was tracing the letter W. And Helen Keller said in her own memoirs that it suddenly dawned on her that this symbol that was being traced on one palm was the name of the sensation she was feeling on the other palm, namely the wetness of water. So you could say, as an empiricist, that she still needed the sense of touch, but Descartes would say, yeah, but the realization that the shape of W was the name of the sensation, the realization, the understanding that things have names was in her mind. And that realization did not depend on the senses, it depended on her mind. And this notion of her ability to understand this was a notion that awakened in her mind. And that's quite an amazing thing. Now, you can use this example to argue both ways, but I think it's a brilliant example that no matter which senses we're using or not using, there's something else going on when we understand something. And that thing that we call understanding is taking place in the mind and not in the senses. And that's the rationalist position too. And that's a really good place to leave you. For today, thank you very much for your great participation in this first lecture. You will have your breakout lectures with your own instructors, and you'll continue, I hope, with the second meditation. And I will do so with my group, Section M, on Thursday at 11 on Blackboard. Remember, not Zoom, Blackboard on Thursdays. And thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed the first lecture of our course. And there's a lot more to come. You're more than welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Professor.
I look forward to seeing you all next Monday. And we're going to tackle Berkeley, who's just as radical as Descartes, but completely on the opposite pole. He's going to tell us everything we know comes from the senses.
So, Professor.
Yes.
Just read meditation 1. Just read meditation 2 and that's it?
Yes, that will be fine. If you read meditation 2 for Thursday, you'll be all set. Okay?
Thank you. Bye.
All right.
Professor.
Have a wonderful week, everyone. Stay safe and stay
Professor.
well. And I will upload this.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. You have a great
Professor?
day too. Bye for now.
Professor?
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Hello? Professor?
Yes, I'm still here.
Is there a branch of philosophy that melds both rationalism and empiricism?
Yes, certainly. You can, in the most modern terms, you're going to need to be both. Okay. You will actually probably want to be partly a rationalist and partly an empiricist.
Right.
Okay. And I think that's a balanced view. That's a more balanced view, but there are very many different nuanced positions in there. Yeah. And
okay.
You can find which balance point you like. Good question. All right, we'll stop it there. See you all next Monday. I'll see some of you on Thursday. Have a great week and bye for now.